Good afternoon and welcome to the third in the coffee series of the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership at Seton Hall University. I'm Reggie Lewis, the center's executive director, and it's my pleasure to greet you from our campus here in South Orange, New Jersey. The coffee series provides an opportunity to showcase the inspirational stories of servant leaders. Each of our guests has deepened our understanding of the promise of this leadership philosophy and the endless ways in which individuals, organizations, and society in general can be transformed for the better. And I assure you, our guest today will not disappoint. As president of Starbucks North America and Starbucks International, Howard Behar provided pivotal leadership to the company's exponential growth and expansion. His work contributed to the coffee giant's expansion from 28 stores to 15,000 stores spanning 5 continents. I'm hoping Howard will reveal how he kept up with 15,000 stores. But throughout this enormous period of growth, amazingly, Howard and his team created and sustained a culture that supports the well-being of employees, customers, and the very communities being served. Moderating our conversation today will be Don Frick, the author of Robert K. Greenleaf, A Life of Servant Leadership, which constitutes the only authorized biography of the center's namesake, Robert Greenleaf. Don is also a member of the Greenleaf Academy faculty and a dear friend of the center. But first, a quick word about the center before we start. Founded in 1964, for well over 50 plus years, the center has worked to promote the understanding, awareness, and practice of servant leadership, a philosophy in which the leader first seeks to serve. The center offers an extensive catalog of publications, opportunities for online learning, workshops, and an annual summit. Before we close out today's program, we'll say a bit more about activities and events taking place at the center, but let's begin. Don, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Reggie. We're so happy to have Howard Behar with us. He is a Seattle native. Maybe you can talk about his parents who were immigrants and his first work. He, of course, is an executive with Starbucks who started that fabulous international division that Reggie mentioned. And I can say that if you read the book, you'll see he knows more about servant leadership than he does coffee, I swear. Howard, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you very much. Sorry, my light just went kaboom here. Got to fix it. That's all the way it is, technology. Okay, got it. Yeah, thanks. Thanks.
You're welcome. I have a quote about you from someone who knows you well. Here it is. Howard is the most no nonsense, no putting on airs, no fanfare, authentic person you could ever meet. He's always demonstrated that a great business is a business with conscience, and he has shown in leadership roles spanning more than 30 years that one can do well by doing good. I find this interesting. I want to dream big dreams and then dream bigger. While Howard wants to dream big dreams and then take 5 steps back to see what could go wrong, even if it's an idea he's been championing and passionately wants to turn into a reality. Between Howard and me, the language we spoke was one of trust. Now that's from Starbucks founder Howard Schultz. And I think by the end of our conversation, you, the viewers, and all the seekers in our audience will decide that you're probably guilty as charged, that you probably do act that way. Well, I'd like to start with the beginning, which in this case is the book. Let's start with the names, and then I want to circle back to some of your past and experience. Leading in Hard Times, it's actually got 3 titles. The lead title is Leading in Hard Times. It's not about the coffee. Lessons on putting people first from a life at Starbucks. If it's not about the coffee, what is it about, Howard?
You know the answer to that. It's about the people. Coffee by itself is a fruit that grows on trees until somebody discovered it, whatever it is, thousands of years ago. It just was on those trees and the goats would eat it. And then a human being figured out what you could do with it. And from then on, they picked it, they roasted it, they shipped it, they boiled it or whatever, however they made it. Somebody drank it. And so it's about people.
I like the phrase that you have. I'm speaking a little slowly. I was told that my audio was delayed. So maybe I should really talk fast to catch up with my audio. But you said we are not, what business are you in? I love the line you have for this. You say we're not in the coffee
We're not in
business.
the coffee business serving people. We're in the people business serving coffee. It sounds like a small play on words, but it was a big thing. When I first got to Starbucks, it was what I sensed first. I mean, certainly we sell coffee, we roast coffee. Coffee is our art, it's our music, it's our literature. It's a lot of creativity comes out in the coffee. But at the end of the day, it's about the people that make the coffee business grow. And so I was trying to convince people that it was that, all entrepreneurial organizations start out, they think they're in whatever business they're in, the coffee business, the hamburger business, they're in the architecture business, whatever it happens to be. But there is not one business. There isn't one organization. There is not one human being that isn't put on this earth to serve others. And that was even more so, I think, in the coffee business, because it's a very human experience. I think I'll forget that thing. Yeah, anyway.
We'll get back to some of that again in a second. Can you give me your elevator speech about servant leadership? Somebody says, what is servant leadership? What do you tell them?
It's very basic. It's this, that leaders are here to serve their people in their people's journey to accomplish the things that they want out of their lives. And so doing, their people serve the leader and the organization. But it's always got to be serve your people first. Because without that, then why would I want to do anything for you? I mean, you try to manipulate people to do things. When you're a servant leader, people don't need to be told what to do. People want to do it innately because they know that you care about them and they know you'll do anything for them. And when you have that kind of organization, it makes such a huge difference. And I've experienced both sides of that coin, and people that were autocratic leaders and people that were servant leaders. And it was always the servant leaders that people remembered and the people wanted to do things for and wanted to help the organization succeed. So it's really at its basis is the understanding that you're there to serve your people first.
Greenleaf has a best test. How can you tell servant leaders? And he said, well, you can actually measure this stuff, but here's the first one. Here's the first item. Do those being served grow as persons?
Yes. That's it. That's your primary role as a leader, is to grow the people. You grow the people grow the organization, and the organization grows the business. And it's that complex and that simple all at the same time.
It's counterintuitive in some ways compared to the older models of what leaders do. And so sounds a little edgy, a little woo-woo.
Yeah, it's not. If you think about a family, what's a parent's responsibility? To help grow their children, not just to feed them and have them grow in size, but to grow emotionally, to grow intellectually, to grow socially. And that's our primary role in raising our children, is to make them better human beings and to help them contribute to the world in which we live. And so it's exactly the same thing. Not that the people that work in our organization are our children, they're not. But they are people that are important to us, and we should be loving them, just like we love our children, but in a little different, not the familial sense, but in the sense that they're a human being and they're worthy of our love.
Amen, brother.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about your 10 lessons of leadership in the book. They so show, to my way of reading them, fierce integrity. in going below the surface, in knowing who you are and acting congruently and honestly, in being who you are, and following deep principles. So just a couple of little, you have all kinds of memorable aphorisms and sayings here. One of them I liked, there's a large gap between knowing what is right and doing what is right. And then maybe my favorite was number 9, practice leadership, the big noise and the still small voice. That's right out of Greenleaf's writings. It's like you're echoing him. And just reading those lines provokes reflection. So, for example, how do you know what is right? And what's the role of intuition in a servant leader's work?
Well, in terms of treating people, you know what is right by the values you live, and you have to start there. Who are you as a person? And if you're serving people and helping people grow, you know that is right. That's the right thing to do, because that's why we're put on this earth, is to help people and to serve them. But you don't, you know what is right by asking your people, right? If you include in the process of decision making, if you're including your people in that process, right, they help you get to the right decision. See, leaders don't have to have the answers. As a matter of fact, leaders should hardly ever have the answers. It's their people that should have the answers. One of my favorite quotes is a 2-word quote. It goes like this: compassionate emptiness. And what it means is empty of opinion, you're compassionate, or in the case of solving a problem, empty of solutions, but but compassionate with your people and letting your people do the talking, and they'll tell you the direction. I look back at my time for pretty much my whole career, but my time at Starbucks, I didn't have the answers, but my people always did. And when I asked enough people, then together they would form an answer. It wasn't one person necessarily having an answer to a problem or a creative solution to something, or creating a new product or whatever. It was a group of people that maybe they were individuals and they all came together thinking the same thing. And after a while, what happens is you get enough input, you say, aha, that's the direction we can follow, and it worked every time. I always thought of myself as an alchemist. I was never the person. Howard Schultz was a lot more creative than I was, and thought about, but I was a good listener, and that's how I made things work. And that's how I knew what was right.
It brings us to listening.
Yes.
Greenleaf said, don't speak unless you can improve on the silence.
Yeah.
And that one of your principles is listen to the walls. And it doesn't mean just going out like the TV show where people want to see what folks are saying about him. It means listen. And Greenleaf talked about presence, really being present and listening.
One of the walls. It's an interesting thing. People think I'm a little nuts here, maybe, but I worked for a guy that when I was in the home furnishings industry, I grew up in that business a little bit, and I was my first management job, and my boss, the guy that owned the business, he used to say, Howard, before you go home at night, go lock the front door of the store, and I want you to turn off all the lights, and I want you to go sit down in the middle of the showroom in a chair or something, and I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to listen. And he said, just listen to the walls talk. And I thought, Sid, you're crazy. His name was Sid Sheckman. I said, what are you talking about? Listen to the walls talk. So, but he said, no, really, try it. So I tried it a few times. I didn't hear a word. I heard nothing. And then, and I just kept doing it. I said, there must be something here, because he wouldn't have told me to do it unless there was, and one night I'm sitting there and I could just feel the energy in the place, that something was up, something was wrong. I didn't know what it was, had no idea. But there was just a bad energy. And the next morning I got my team together, all the salespeople and the drivers and the accounting people and everything. And we sat down and I said, I kind of have this feeling that something's up here that I need to know about. And I'll be darned if all of a sudden that didn't break the dam loose and people wanted to talk about how they were feeling about working in a place and how they were being treated and what they were unhappy about, what they were happy about. And if I wouldn't have listened to the walls talk and I wouldn't absorb that, right, I wouldn't have known. Now, maybe you could say I should have been asking those questions all along. Well, sometimes you ask those questions all along and people don't speak up, but this time I pushed it. But, from that point forward, I became a true believer in the walls talk. I felt that I could walk into a Starbucks store and tell you how that store is doing. I don't mean financially, but emotionally. And you can just kind of sense it. You can kind of feel it by how people look and what the customers are doing. And you can close your eyes and feel it. And so that's where that idea came from. And I've lived by that today. I still do it. You want to try it? Here's what you do. Next time you're invited to somebody's home, and they always offer, would you like something to drink? Say yes, and go sit in the living room when they're gone and close your eyes and see what you feel. It's those antennae that God gave us that are in our head. And if we just tune into that, we feel it.
Greenleaf wrote a little bit about that. He believed that we have primal capacities that were really important to our survival. Don't go over that mountain because there's a lion over there, even though you can't see him. And maybe the wind's the way, he can't smell you either. And so he felt that, it's kind of a Freudian image of an iceberg with 90% of it buried, but it's wise. We are many. Internally, we are many. And that piece of us is always available, but you got to trust it.
You got to trust it.
Do you practice any meditation or withdrawal techniques for yourself?
Meditation, I do. I used to do a lot of it. I haven't done it as much as I used to do, but I used to meditate every day. Matter of fact, when transcendental meditation was popular, there was, I can't remember the name of the book, but it was about meditation in business. And I remember our whole company got into meditation. It was amazing what it did. But I am good at it. I'm good at just closing my eyes and just quieting my voice and my mind and just sitting down in it. It doesn't have to be for 20 minutes. Sometimes it can be just for 5.
Can you tell us, let's go to the lead title for your book, Leading in the Hard Times.
Yes.
Can you tell us some hard times, especially in your international days when you took that up at the age of 48 or so?
Yeah, I was older than that, but thank you.
Who's counting?
Anyway.
Who's counting?
Yeah, who's counting? That's right. Well, everybody looks at Starbucks and thinks about, well, this is this one, pathway to the stars. It hasn't been that way at all. I mean, there were many times in the Starbucks journey that it was tough. I mean, right out of the gate, I got to Starbucks. And, you don't always get all the information when you join an organization. And all of a sudden I realized we were losing money in Chicago and the stores weren't doing well. And we had to figure out what was wrong or we weren't going to be able to raise any more venture capital. And we needed money to expand. So I decided to move there, and I moved there for 3 months and to try to figure out what's going on and to see if we couldn't figure out solutions for it. And so I was there for the 3 months and we figured out what we needed to do, which wasn't so complex, but I came back and we decided we needed to open stores faster and we needed to raise some pricing because our costs were higher. But those hard times are always there. And, I always believe there are no stressful situations, only stressful responses. And so I tried to always take all the situations that were difficult, that maybe would be stressful to others and figure out how to not respond in a stressful way, but rather think like a person of action and act like a person of thought, and tried to find pathways towards solutions. And, when we first started Starbucks International, I'm an American guy. I was born here. I had 2 immigrant parents, but I had no really experience dealing with other countries and other cultures outside of our country, except on the buy side. I bought furniture and things like that outside, but there's not a lot different when you're selling into a culture versus buying from a culture. You're being served versus serving. And so I was always in a hurry to get things done. I'm kind of an A-type personality. And our first country was Japan. Well, Japan has a lot of unwritten rules that you don't really understand or really know about. And they have a lot of written ones too. And they always were frustrating to me because they always were slowing us down. And I would get mad and I'd get mad at my team. Why can't we go faster? Why can't we get this done? And they would always come back and say, well, it's just different here. And so finally I had a conversation with our partner in Japan. I said, teach me. And he said, you know, Howard, in Japan, we build relationships before we do business, right? We build strong relationships and then we do business. And he said, everything you're going to do here, you're going to find the same thing. And finally, I got it. I always thought I was a relationship guy, but not in the sense of the way Japanese created their relationships. And I slowed myself down. And a guy that I was working with put it so ever so perfectly. He gave me this quote. He was Chinese, and he gave it to me in Chinese. And basically it says, big noise on stairs, nothing coming down. So I didn't want to be a big noise on stairs, nothing coming down. So I learned to quiet my head down and those things and allow the process to happen. And I said, okay, we're going to be better than the Japanese companies living by these unwritten rules. And we get really good at it. And it changed everything, because then we were getting stuff faster than the Japanese companies could get it done. And so, you know, those are the kind of things you run into, the walls you run into, and you have to figure out how to deal with them.
It's critical. I once shot a film that included lighting Westminster Abbey and shooting that. And so I was coached by my cameraman, and he said, now, this is not America. You need to go into the vicar and you need to sit down and hello. You have to have tea. You have to talk about the weather. And then after considerable time passes, in a matter of fact way, bring up why you're here. Actually, you need to wait till he asks before you do that. I would have blown that whole thing.
Yeah.
Will you tell us a little bit more about your past and who were your models and mentors?
Sure. So I grew up with immigrant parents. Both of my parents were from other countries. My dad came to the United States in 1911 as a 15-year-old, had one brother here and couldn't speak the language. My mother came in 1917 as a 9-year-old, couldn't speak the language. She was from Latvia. My dad was from Bulgaria, and they met in Seattle. And I grew up in an immigrant household. And, you know, when you grow up in an immigrant household with parents that lived on dirt floors in the old country, you know, they relate their stories, and you grow an appreciation for the fact that life was not so easy for them. And of course, my parents survived the Depression as a married couple, and almost lost their house and their little apartment building that they had above their grocery store. And they survived that. And so I wasn't born till way after the Depression. I was born in 1944. And, but still, I experienced that with them because they always were talking about it. And so I grew to appreciate, their hard work. And my dad had a small mom and pop grocery store. And I always like to tell this story because I think it's an important lesson. At least it was for me. And one day I was always in there after school. And one day I'm up by the cash register at my dad's. And this is the days when they had a crank cash register. You push all the buttons. You had 10 buttons across, 10 going down. You push the buttons and pull the crank, right? And so he was ringing up all these groceries for this customer that was in the store. And he looked at me, he said, Howard, go get me a couple of baskets of strawberries. And so I went in the back and I got a couple of baskets of strawberries. I brought them up. He put them into the bag and the customers walked out. And I was old enough to realize my dad hadn't pulled the crank. He hadn't rung the strawberries up. And I said, Dad, I think you forgot to ring the strawberries up. And he said, Howard, not everything we do in life do we need to get paid for. Some things we do in life just because we care about other people. Those people that were just here, they're not just our customers. They're our neighbors and our friends. And I know that they're having tough times right now, and strawberries are not cheap. And so I just wanted to give them something because I cared about them. I didn't realize the importance of that lesson until I was much older. But it's really stayed with me my whole life. Not everything you do in life do you need to get paid for. Just because you do something good doesn't mean you should get a raise. Just because, you create something doesn't mean you should get promoted. You do things because you want to do them. And that lesson that he taught me, even though I didn't really realize its worth until later on in my life, has been so valuable to me. So, those stories, the things I learned from my parents were important. I probably had I had a lot of mentors along the way. People, you're looking at a guy that barely got out of high school. I had a couple of years of community college. I wasn't exactly your A student. When I left community college, I was good at beer when I went in, and I got great at single malt scotches by the time I left. And so I was not exactly your best student, but I learned by doing, and I learned by being around other people. And there was always somebody there to teach me. I don't know why I was lucky, but there was one really important guy, a guy named Jim Jensen. And he was the guy that gave me Greenleaf's first pamphlet, right? That little orange pamphlet, and taught me about servant leadership. Now, I would like to say that I practiced and lived a lot of the things, but I was young. I was only in my mid-20s at the time, practicing, but I had no words for it. I had no understanding of it. I was an unconscious competent, if you want to say. And he taught me about servant leadership, and he also taught me that I could change my view of the world, that I could change habits by you doing affirmations, by doing all sorts of things. And he just created a new life for me. And by introducing me to servant leadership and Robert Greenleaf, and by teaching me that by changing how I thought about things, I could actually change me. And those are the two single most important lessons that I've ever learned in my life, without a question.
Wow. Aristotle said that habits create virtues.
Yeah, it's true.
So
And
if you can,
your habits you can change. You can be whoever you want to be. You can change your habits. You can create new habits. It takes work, but it's doable.
I want our viewers to know that we will be offering your questions to Howard soon, 5 minutes or so, and so they will be responded to. At one point in your book, you say you just hate rules. You just hate them. Can you talk about that a little bit? I think a few of us have worked in places where we did too, but we had to follow them.
Yeah, I was never good at rules. I coined the term. I like recipes, not rules. Tell me what you're trying to bake. You're trying to bake a carrot cake. Okay, not everybody likes lots of carrots. I, for one, I'm not a big carrot guy, but I love carrot cake. The truth of the matter is, what I love is the frosting between the layers of the carrot cake. So I may make a carrot cake with a half a carrot, and so I like a lot of walnuts. I put the walnuts in. So I always believed that with the people that worked in the organization, I didn't want to create a lot of rules. Now, we had some rules, safety rules, to protect people, to make sure they didn't get hurt. We had accounting rules to comply with federal government regulations. We had those kinds of things. But most of the things that we do in the coffee business are about serving other people. And when that comes to serving other people, there should be no rules, right? You do what it takes to make those human beings, our customers, happy. You do what it takes to make the people in your organization feel appreciated and cared about. And that doesn't lend itself to rules. That lends itself to caring, to the word yes. Yes. I always believe that yes was the most powerful word in the world. Some people, and we grow up thinking that no is, we can hardly wait till we get the opportunity to be the ability to say no to people. But the truth of the matter is, you're powerful when you can say yes. And so that's kind of where that came from. And so we had these, we'd hire people out of the fast food industry. And of course, fast food companies have lots of manuals. I hated manuals. I didn't want to have a manual. I said, okay, we can have tool books. And a tool book is like a toolbox, right? You go to it when you need the tool. You don't go to it because it's there. You don't go to the tool book, the manual every time, or the tool book every time, when you can solve the problem. An example of that for me is a very simple one. We've all gone into our kitchen and seen one of those little screws in the light switch loose. We can always tell it's a little bit loose. You don't need to go into the garage to get a screwdriver. You can go to the knife drawer and you can pull out a knife and you can turn the screw on that real easy because it fits. Or sometimes a dime in your pocket will do exactly the same thing. You didn't need to go to the toolbox. Just think and create a solution to the problem. And we're all capable of doing that. But sometimes rules get in the way and manuals get in the way because people say, well, go look at a manual. I say, what do you think we should do first? So our tool books, it had what we were trying to do. And then it would have the reason we were trying to do it. We didn't just say, do this. We just said, here's what we were trying to accomplish. Now here's why we're trying to do that. So people remember the why much more than they remember the what. And sometimes we need to change things. They would come back and say, the truth of the matter is we don't really need to be doing that anymore. And maybe there's another way to do it. And that's what I wanted to have happen. So that's where you get me.
I had no idea when
Huh?
I had no idea when I got up this morning, I would learn so much from a set screw. That's great.
Exactly. It's that simple, Yeah.
I have one more and then we'll go to the questions. Let's say you have a major business decision to make and you got whatever time you need to make it, but it can't take forever. What would be important to you? Can you take us through the steps? Not that they're rules, but the logical things that you do, and what are the most important questions to ask for a major business decision?
Well, first of all, what is the decision we're trying to make and why? Why are we trying to make this decision? Why is it important to us? Many times you think that a decision needs to be made, or an action be taken, but it doesn't. It's just something that got in your head. Somebody said something to you, and so you took it in. And so the first thing is to figure out, okay, what is it that you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it? And then you go to your people and you start to talk about it. You put it in front of the group, but maybe it's individual by individual or in front of the group. And you say, here's something that's come up. What do you think about this? And do you think that we need to change something here, or we need to make a decision here? Or a problem came up that we do need to make a decision about, that we, maybe somebody got injured in the stores and we needed to change how we were doing something. I don't know, whatever it happens to be. So I just think that you go to your people first and ask them what they think and get their input on it and make sure that they agree with, most importantly, not just the what, but the why. Because the easiest way to get something done is when people know why. If you just come down and say, do this, all the blocks go up. No, he wants us to do this. We're not doing that. But if you tell them the why and you include them in the conversation about the why, then they feel like they're part of it. They want to do it and they make it their own. And that's what we're after. But so we'd go through those steps and then, we let's say that I'll give you an example where there was conflict. So we decided that we were going to introduce Frappuccino. And it was not actually the name. We didn't name it. It came from a company we bought called Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf in Boston. And they had a product called Frappuccino, different than what we had. And the product actually came from a competitor in Southern California. Not exactly, but similar to it. And so we developed this product, and there was big argument in the company about what to call this product. And there were some people that said, you can call it Frappuccino only if it has coffee in it. And I said, how about the people that just don't want coffee in it, just want vanilla or want chocolate or want caramel, whatever it is, right? And they said, you can't call it that. You got to call it something else. And so we had this round and round and round and round conversations about it. Everybody had different opinions. Marketing had this opinion. Product development had another opinion. And I kept getting all this input. And I finally came to the conclusion that we'd call it Frappuccino, that all products would be called Frappuccino, because what I believed is that better to have one internal brand name for this kind of product. It was a coffee, it's blended with ice. And that customers would understand by what was in it, by what it was called. And so a mocha Frappuccino would be coffee and chocolate, and a caramel Frappuccino could be a caramel coffee Frappuccino. I don't even know what they call them anymore, but anyway. But we had one person that was so adamant that we don't do it. And, it came time to the end of the time where I said, we have to make a decision. Now, this is one of the, and this is a decision that is mine to make, right? She agreed with that, it was mine to make. And I said, so I'm making the decision. It's all going to be called Frappuccino. And we've got to move on from this discussion because we can't stay caught in no man's land forever. And so I knew she was an outspoken person. And so I went to Howard and Orr. I said, I'm in charge of this, am I not? I wanted to make sure that I understood, how they felt about it. They said, yes, absolutely. They said, so here's my decision on this. Is there any input you want to give me? No. Okay. I said, then we're going with it. I said, if anybody comes to you and says they disagree, send them back to me. And so sometimes, it's not, I don't consider it autocratic. I just considered it was a decision that was my responsibility to make. And in the scheme of servant leadership, sometimes it's like that. Because at the end of the
It's
day,
not
Robert
like
Greenleaf
you.
said this. He said, servant leadership is about performance too,
That's right.
right? So we had to perform.
Accountability.
Yeah, and accountability. Yeah.
We have some questions. The first one is, how did your people know that they were actually growing as a result of it being all about the people? Are there measurements for those kinds of things?
Yeah, there are probably better ones today than we had when I was early on at Starbucks, but there's a company in Seattle called Tiny Pulse, right? And Tiny Pulse basically sends out Tiny Pulses questions, maybe one a week, one a month, and people can give feedback on things. So, you collect input on things about departments, about people in the organization, about what's going on in the company, and that can give you indications of how people feel they're being treated and cared about in the organization. And then you have to follow up on those things. But we used to do 360 reviews for our people, for our leadership, and feedback we'd get, would be things that we could use to help coach our people. But people know when they're growing and when they're not. They tell you. When you ask them a question, how are you feeling about working at Starbucks? Are you feeling like you're growing? Or you feel like you're getting to where you want to get in your life? And they would tell you whether or not they were. And that was a question I always asked. The question I'd ask is, how are we doing? And that was the signals for them to say how they're feeling about their time here, and also to tell me about how I was doing. Yeah, because I needed to know that too. Was I doing the things that they needed for me to support them with? Was I helping them be all they could be? And so, it's conversation. You don't have to have any fancy tools. Just ask. Do you feel like you're growing as a person? And you can tell when people are growing. You watch them at meetings. If you're observant, and it's not, do you know when your kid is growing? You absolutely do. As the most amazing thing, for all of you that have had children and you see the baby comes and it's a week old, it's a month old, every day that child is learning something new, right? And you know how you call your parents, hey, they rolled over, hey, they did this, they did that, they spoke their first word, they said daddy or mom, whatever it is, right? They're growing, and you see it and you know it because you're in tune and you're in touch with it. That same attention that you give to your children is the same attention that you need to give to your people in your organization. You need to be aware, caring, and observant. You need to listen with more. You need to listen with more than your ears, and you need to gaze with more than your eyes.
You're bringing back a lot of memories of being a young father. Yeah. I have an appreciation email here, no question, but I had the good fortune of growing with Starbucks in the late 90s as it expanded from Vancouver to Eastern Canada. I discovered a love of retail and ultimately HR. I credit the lessons I learned at Starbucks with forming the basis of my career. Thank you, Howard. What are some of the best advice you could provide for a social entrepreneur to scale their business as a servant leader? I'm not sure what scale and servant leader are linked, but you talk about that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've always heard this reason: when you get big, then it's hard to care as much. And I always say it's the opposite. The bigger you get, the more you need to care, the more you need to pay attention. When Starbucks was small and we had 28 stores, I knew every store manager by name. I probably knew their wives and their children's names until we got to about 300 stores. And then it just became too much for my little brain to handle. So, and that was the same way so what I did. So in the early days, I'd pay a lot of attention to the operations of the business, all the nitty gritty things. And as we brought people into the organization, they were better at it than I was. So I changed my focus to 100% being about people. about growing the people, to understanding that we are about serving others. And that's what I tried to drive home. If you asked me a question about the company, about the numbers of the company, I was never going to give you those numbers right away. I'd always talk about people first, coffee second, and the business third. I always thought my day job was the people, my night job was the people. So if you want to grow a servant-led business, and what you need to do is figure out what that means to you. Because what it means to me, what it means to you, what it means to somebody else might be a little bit different. You know, Robert Greenleaf wasn't prescriptive. He didn't say, do this, do that, do this, do that, right? He said, here is a set of values, here is a set of thoughts. Now it's your job to figure out your pathway through it. And so that's what you have to do. But you got to start with who you are as a person. If you don't have your values written down, and then the definition of what those values mean to you, then how can you possibly teach those values to somebody else? How can you possibly expect anybody to follow you if they don't know who you are as a person? So servant leadership is about that. You know, people don't care what you say, they want to know what you do. And they watch what you do. And so that's how servant leadership gets formed. And you just have to stay with it. You define what it means to your organization, and everybody should be on board of that, with that. And you know, with however you want to do it. At Starbucks, we had what we call our BHAG, Jim Collins, you know, Big Hairy Audacious Goal. And our Big Hairy Audacious Goal was to be one of the most well-known and respected organizations in the world, known for nurturing and inspiring the human spirit. Not a thing about coffee, not a thing about how big we are going to be, not a thing about how much money we're going to make, to be known for nurturing and inspiring the human spirit. So, you know, and those are the kind of things you have to think about as a leader growing an organization. You know, it's purpose that matters. You know, it's purpose that matters. And if everybody's just aligned with the greater purpose, right? And they understand that we're about being a servant-led company, and here's what we're trying to leave behind in this world, you know, they come on board with it. And then you just constantly reinforce it. I don't care how great a performer you might have. If they don't care about the people, they can't stay in your organization. You can have somebody that's not so great a performer, but they're absolutely fantastic at being a servant leader. I have a lot more room for that. I'm going to give them a lot of time to try to figure out how to get their economic performance back up.
Yeah, you know, and that's interesting because when you're faithful to those values, those deep values, unexpected things can happen. We have a note here that said, I'm grateful to have read your book prior to COVID. Yeah. As a product manager and trainer in our memory care communities, the principles have provided so much guidance for me as I support my team members. Thank you. What is the servant leader's role in challenging inequities that are woven into our organizational culture?
I mean, I think it's a primary role, is trying to sort out what those inequities are, what they mean. You know, and organizations, you know, it's struggles for all organizations, right? It's not easy. It's not like it's just, you know, you have a methodology and you get this rule book, and if you just follow it, you know, everything will be equitable. It's just not true. And you could be equitable and then fall off the train, you know? So I remember early days of Starbucks, we used to have what's called open forums, and I think they still do. But in an open forum, you could ask any question you wanted to ask. And this was when Starbucks was very small. And one day we're at an open forum, and there's, I don't know, 400 or 500 people there, and all the officers sitting in bar stools, and the people in the audience. It wasn't just our job to present. We had to listen to every question, and there were no dumb questions, and there were no questions that would receive any retribution. That was part of the rules. You didn't have to be shy about asking anything. If you want to know how much money I made, whatever it was, they would get an answer to the question, an honest, truthful answer. If we didn't know the answer, we would get back to them. So one day we're in an open forum meeting, and a young African-American guy named Daryl Moore, or not Daryl Moore, Daryl Collins is his name. Still I'm friends with him today. Anyway, he stood up and he looked at Howard Schultz, and he said, and there was a bunch of white people sitting up in these bar stools, right? And he just looked at Howard Schultz and he says, when am I going to see a face like mine sitting on one of those bar stools? The room went dead silent. I mean, talking about a pin drop, I mean, you could have heard anything. You could have heard a piece of dust drop, you know. That's how quiet it got, because everybody said, "Whoa," you know, that was a big question, you know. As open as we were, you know, nobody had ever asked a question like that. And God bless Howard Schultz. He just took that question and he said, Daryl, That's probably one of the best questions I've ever had. And I don't know the answer to that, but Daryl, would you be willing to help me figure that out? And that began the process of changing the dynamics of Starbucks. Because we never thought we were just trying to survive at those points in time. And we never thought about diversity. And diversity then went into our guiding principles. And we began on a journey of diversity. And at one time, and I don't know the numbers now, but 50% of all the people in leadership positions were female, up to senior leadership positions. And I think 10 to 15% were people of color. And I think it's even better that today. And Starbucks, I know today, discloses all of that information. It's all public. And I know that the leadership there today evaluates their leaders on whether or not they're achieving their equity goals, their diversity goals, and those things. And we publish even the pay, the pay levels by gender, by race, everything. So it's all out there. So, and what it does for us is hold us accountable, right? You don't have to be afraid of it. Just put it out there. No, people may get mad at you because you're not perfect, but there's no perfect organizations, no perfect people. And it's always going like this. For example, Starbucks had just lost 2 of its senior Black executives, 2 women, right? And one went to be the CEO of a big drugstore chain. The other one moved back to Atlanta to be head of a new department. So now you're starting all over again, right? So the best way to fill those positions, one got filled internally with another as best as we could with an African American, and the other one, I'm sure they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with it. But you got to have it out there, and it's got to be public, because everybody thinks you can do it without having goals. Impossible. It's that old adage: if you don't know where you're going, any path will get you there or not get you there. So equity is important, and it's very important. It's one of the things that leaders have to be paying attention to. And you get it by observing, by understanding what you're trying to achieve, but also by asking questions. Because a lot of things about equity are not color-based or not gender-based,
Hmm. You're reminding me of TD Industries in Dallas, which Greenleaf himself consulted with.
Yeah.
And they won so many awards as best company to work for. They had to make a Hall of Fame to let other people win. Anyway, down there, they're transparent the same way you are. Have you ever been down to visit? They're really an interesting
I know
group.
Jack.
But they partially met Jack Lowe, yeah. They partially measure success by how many other companies want to hire away their people.
Yeah.
That's great, And
that's what
you can feel.
You're reading.
You can feel that.
Living, Loving, and Learning by Leo Buscaglia.
Yes, I did.
It's an old book, and it's one of the great quotes in that I've always tried to live by. I want to be one of those kind of leaders that builds bridges for their people to cross and then gently break the bridge behind them. And that means that not all people stay with your organization, but if you've done the right things and they go on to take the lessons they've learned and carry it on to another place, then we've accomplished our goal.
Yeah. I have a question here. Starbucks also grew by acquisition, that is by buying and replacing local coffee shops. Was this a benevolent, that is servant leadership inspired process, or standard M&A?
Well, I don't ever think that we replaced local coffee shops. We may have, like when we bought Coffee Connection in Boston, we tried to keep the name for a while, and then we realized it just wasn't going to work. And so we unified it all around Starbucks. And we've bought 2 or 3 other companies like that through acquisition. Seattle's Best Coffee, I can think of Dietrich's in California, and maybe a couple other ones. But as far as replacing local coffee shops, I think it's been exactly the opposite. We've probably spawned more local coffee shops. Well, I know there's a hell of a lot more local coffee shops than there are Starbucks stores. And if you come to Seattle, I don't know how many, there must be 20 companies all in the coffee shop business in the Seattle area, and there was only one or two when we started. So, our goal, we don't look at, if you want to compete with Starbucks in a coffee shop, you can do it. There's lots of ways to compete with Starbucks. They don't own the business. They're just part of the business. And But yes, we did grow somewhat by acquisition, but most of our, probably 95% of our growth was by just growing our own store base.
Um, I'd like to, I don't want to, we're getting close to running out of time, but I want to mention something that you have reminded me of, and something that Greenleaf wrote. And I think others will be, or that are here, fit the category of being a spirit carrier. Here's what Greenleaf wrote. In my view of the world, there are people who I would call spirit carriers. Servants who nurture the human spirit are spirit carriers. They serve to connect those who do the work of the world or who are being prepared for that role with vision from both past and contemporary prophets. Those servants find the resources and make the intensive effort to be an effective influence. They don't just make speeches or write books as the prophet does. They're spirit carriers. They connect the prophecy with the people so that it changes their lives. The spirit is power, but only when the spirit carrier, the servant, as nurturer of the human spirit, is a powerful, not a casual force. And I want to say now, thank you for being a spirit carrier.
Thank you very much.
I think it fits you perfectly. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
I wouldn't have said it if I didn't feel it. Now, I have a friend who consulted with Starbucks on implementing servant leadership, on training the managers.
Yeah, right.
And as I recall, they had some big events
Yes.
to train the managers in servant leadership and let them experience it, who then trained all the local managers.
I like to use.
Do you remember that whole thing and how that?
I like to use the word educate the managers, because I think you train pets, you educate.
I'd like to use the word evolve. Yeah, evolve too.
Yeah. But yes,
Was that successful?
very successful. Yeah. And I was the one that brought it in because I had been introduced to it before. And we ended up bringing a number of people in. One, Jim Autry, who I think you know pretty well, that wrote the book Love and
Richard.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. James Autry. Yeah. Yeah. And he wrote the book Love and Profit and some books on servant leadership. But servant leadership became, a driving force with inside of Starbucks. I don't think it's always called that today with inside of Starbucks, but I don't care what people call it. Whatever your words are for it, as long as you're practicing the values of servant leadership, you can call it any way you want, and it's the basic language that's important, that we're here to serve each other. We care for our people. We love our people, we help our people grow as human beings, we build bridges and all the things that we need to do to help our people grow. And when we do that, then our people, like I said, grow the organization, and the organization grows the business.
It sounds logical after you hear it.
Yeah, it does sound
for many people. Yeah, at the beginning, it didn't sound very logical.
Can I
had
acknowledge
about
somebody?
finished your
I see a question on the chat, or a comment in the chat. It's Erica Hempstead. And she says, yes, she worked at Robson 1 and Robson 2. This was in Vancouver, British Columbia. That Robson 1 and Robson 2, that's when we figured out early that Starbucks was going to be bigger than any of us thought it was going to be. These two stores across the street from us, just kitty corner. And at one time we had a third store on the same intersection, Robson 1 and Robson 2. God, that brings back memory.
Anything you would like? Anything else you would like to say to us, Howard, before we leave?
Well, I think that I want to show you something. I think that maybe it will help people understand better. So for 50 years, I've carried this little document this document with me. And this is what I call Howard, a picture of Howard in 50 words or less. And this has on it my mission statement, my core values, and how I do everything, what I call my 6 Ps. And this drives my life. I carry it with me all the time. I have it on my iPad. I always have a copy in my briefcase. I have a wall in front, have it on my wall in front of next to my computer. And this is constantly reminding me who Howard is and what matters. Because like all human beings, I have a board of directors that sit on my shoulders, and they're talking to me all the time, trying to influence how the decisions I make, who I am, what I do. And I always have this to go back to. So in times when I'm dealing with something that I'm uncomfortable about, or times when something is really great and I forget my humbleness, which we all can do, I have a place to go back to. And so I'd encourage everybody that's, on this call to take the time to write down your 8 to 10 core values. Not that there aren't 50 other values that might describe who you are, but the 8 to 10 core that are really, really important to you, and they really drive your actions and your decisions in your life. And write down your personal mission statement or BHAG or whatever you want to call it. Why are you here? What are you here to do? You can change any of these words anytime. Write them in pencil so you can erase them and change them. And it's important to really live by a set of values. And that's why I say, if you don't know where you're going, any path will get you there. And live life with intention. It's a much more fulfilling way to live a life. So that's my
It's
last.
the nobler choice. Yeah. Greenleaf would say it's the nobler choice.
Yeah, right.
This book can change your life. It's probably backwards on there. Not about the coffee. Please read it. And then sit down and do your own 50-word piece that you carry with you for 50 years. Are you willing to share any of that?
Sure, absolutely. So my mission statement, I plagiarized from Starbucks when we were doing our BHAG, and I had a different mission before that. And so this is my mission: to live my life every day, nurturing and inspiring the human spirit of myself and others. What I've learned is, after living for 77 years, if I'm not okay with me, then it's very difficult to do something for somebody else. So I have to nurture and inspire my own spirit. My core values are honesty, fairness, respect for self and others, responsibility, integrity, trust in self and others, which to me is one of the most important things, because without trust, I always give trust before I get trust. We have to have trust in a family and any organization. You have to have trust in yourself, and then caring and love. And then how I do everything in my life, what I call my 6 Ps. The first one is with a purpose greater than myself. Everything has to be bigger than Howard, right? It's a thing that when I get up in the morning, I say, yes, I'm here today to live my life to its fullest with purpose. The second thing, if I have a purpose bigger than myself, then I darn well better be passionate about it. Scream it from the highest mountaintops. Then the third P is persistence, because there are rocks in all the rivers of our lives, and you're going to hit them. Some you're going to see them, some you're not going to see. Some you're just going to boom, and it's going to shake you to your core sometimes, right? But persistence pays in life, and you got to stick with it, even when you want to give up. And then the fourth P is patience. And you kind of think that, well, persistence, patience, how do they go together? Well, patience is important because not everything comes in the time frame that you want it to come in. And not everybody gets to the same place you are in the same time frame. And you got to have patience with yourself first, and always for others. And then the fifth P is performance. Performance matters. Performance matters in your personal life. If your job is to take out the garbage, then you shouldn't have to be told twice to take out the garbage. I know when I've forgotten, because my wife yells, Howard, but performance matters. Performance matters at work. Performance matters in your personal life. Performance matters with you. If you commit to do something, then performance matters. You got to be able to look at the mirror every night and say, how did I do today? And then the 6P, the most important, everything you do is for people, for serving others. And that's how I try to live my life.
I hear applause all across the country. Thank you. I feel inspired. Reggie?
All right. Well, I did say that Howard would not disappoint. Thank you, Howard. I hope we get some more time with you at a future event. Thank you for reminding us that it's always about the people, serving them, caring for them. Thank you so much. And Don, we are once again in your debt. So we appreciate the wonderful role you played today as our moderator. And for all of you who joined us, it's not too late to sign up for our April 29th Foundations of Servant Leadership course. Learn more about that at greenleaf.org. Also, registration is still open for the International Servant Leader Summit taking place from June 9th through the 11th. Find out more by visiting servantleadersummit.org. Stay tuned for our next guest next month. Again, thank you all for joining us, and stay safe. Bye-bye.